So this is for those of you who have been attending or watched these things recorded on demand. This is part 4 in a series that we've been doing primarily with provision analytics with Rob and Ken, who will introduce here in a few minutes, on AI, generative AI, and a number of different topics that we've had from there. And let me see if I move forward, we can kind of see what those are. The first one, we started off with generative analytics, and that's AI, I'm sorry. And that's a very popular, obviously, subject these days. So we kind of wanted to set the ground for a lot of things that we were doing. How does AI, and I think we have this doubled in here for some reason or other, but the first one was generative AI, not how AI delivers market expansions. We did not do that one twice. But kind of setting the ground for some of the other things. What leaders within organizations need to really understand about the impact of AI. And then, of course, going into, how does that affect your numbers, your margins, your income statements? Where does that actually fit into those things? And then, of course, going into cybersecurity, which is another big part of AI as we're moving forward. How do we make sure that we're secure in that? So 3 really good sessions. And again, we'll talk about it at the end of it. But if you have not seen those, I would highly encourage, we'll get you information on how to go and watch those. Again, if you have not, and kind of really get a feel for, from a leadership perspective, what do you need to know about AI? And then, of course, this last one today is it's almost like a change management thing. How do we ensure that your employees are successful and that you're protecting yourself and that you're making sure that they're able to actually use this stuff successfully within, whether it's the tools that they're using or how are they using generative AI, all the different pieces that come with that. So we'll jump right into that. As far as what we're going to be going through today, macro trends driving the need for AI. We'll do another, again, just in case you were not on there, a brief introduction just to kind of set some of the groundwork for this for AI. This is not a tech talk. This is definitely more of a leadership perspective from AI, so that will go only so deep, but want to make sure we're setting the groundwork for that. Impact on your workforce. So the people who you have within your organization, what is the impact of AI going to have on them, and what do you need to know about that? Impact on HR. So we'll have a number of things that Ken and Rob are going to be presenting on those subjects, and then we're going to have a panel discussion as we've been doing with these between us. So please, as you guys are listening to this, or if you just came with questions, put those questions in chat. I forget all the different places in there, panel discussion or panel questions. There's different places you can put those, but if nothing else, find the chat, post your question out there in chat, and we can answer those live as well. And we'd love to hear your questions on that. That's a lot more important than us just kind of talking back and forth ourselves. So look forward to seeing that. Quick introduction to TAG. TAG CXO was brought together a number of years ago by Paul Heisen, who formed the organization to be a technology leadership company. So a lot of it was revolving around fractional IT leadership, but it's involved in a lot more things. But again, as you can read there, bringing together selected teams, bringing together the right individuals, advisors within the organization to help companies out there, mostly in the small to mid-market, who need to be able to compete with the larger groups, but need to have that same technology leadership within their organization to be successful within the things that they're doing. So some of the services that are offered, advisory service, fractional, again, we mentioned that, program management, a lot of things. If this is something as you get through with this that you're interested in, we can kind of go more in detail on that. But just a quick introduction to TAG, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get to know us at the very end as well. On to the fun part of this. Again, we're very excited to have Ken and Rob from Provisional Analytics. If you guys don't know them from the past ones, you can read here, some introductions. Both these guys have been in the data and analytics, and of course now in the AI space for a very long time. As you can see, they're 30 and 25 years, and coming from a number of large companies. Ken, obviously, you can see there's been recognized, one of the 100 top influential people in data, and also in the AI area space as well, which is huge. And of course, again, just bringing a lot of not just consultative, but truly hands-on experience to these conversations. And we love partnering with them on these things, and just a lot of experience to be able to share with you guys from a number of different perspectives. So with that said, we want to start off with a quick poll question just to kind of get the temperature on a few things. So before we go to the next slide, Zach, if you can kind of pop up the first one where everybody's on, again, you should be able to see the poll question, and we'd love to get your response on that. So how has AI impacted your jobs in your organization today? So obviously you can see that the responses there: no impact, task efficiency, new job creation, job redefinition, job elimination. A lot of questions around that as this continues to get to be more prevalent. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it and how it's impacted you so far. I'll give everybody about a minute. It shouldn't take long to answer that or a few seconds. All right, Zach, we're ready. All right, task efficiency, and I love to see that. Again, and I'll let Ken and Rob kind of go into this stuff in much more detail, but I know there's a lot of scares around, is this going to eliminate jobs? Is this, and there are probably places where it is going to eliminate or change the jobs that are there, as far as you see a redefinition. But I think a lot of this, if you're using it correctly, should lead to exactly what most people are starting to see now is in the efficiencies that. And Ken and Rob, I'll let you guys speak more to that, as you guys are more the experts than me on this. And with that being said, Rob, I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tim. So we think today is a really important discussion, particularly for those who focus on human capital inside their organizations. We spend a lot of time thinking about the dollars and cents of business, and we know that people is incredibly important. It also, by the way, happens to typically be the most expensive part of the expenses in a business. And so really this intersection of AI and human capital and what the possibilities are is where we want to focus. We believe that today is really the most important time, really in the history of business, to be an HR professional or somebody who's focused on how people are going to evolve across the enterprise. So let's dive into it. Next slide, Tim. As we get into the conversation, I keep going to the next slide. So as we get into the conversation, if AI were just an exciting buzz word, a flashy object that, if ChatGPT and the fun stuff we can do by going on DALL-E with pictures, if that was all there was really to this, we wouldn't still be talking about it. And so very quickly to set the stage, why is it that AI continues to be such a focus for organizations? And the reason is a combination of factors tied to the economic environment that we're in, as well as, of course, technology advancements. And so what are those macroeconomic environment issues? Well, first of all, we're not in a zero interest rate environment anymore. So cost of capital has gone up. That is a headwind to companies. Their expenses go up as they refinance their debt. There continue to be labor shortages in key areas, and it's hard to get labor and jobs filled in areas like call center or drivers or other parts of the economy. There's been wage inflation. We know that supply chain costs have gone up. Post-COVID, we see that leveling out. But as people are focused on having the right balance between risk and just-in-time supply chain, which is, I think, a lot of what hurt the economy when we had the shock, that's raised some costs. And then as we get later into the economic cycle, pricing power starts to wane for the consumer. You start hearing about all these are headwinds for businesses. What's exciting about AI and automation is the capabilities that it brings are an incredible antidote to margin pressure. Things that can help you increase margin, like automating your processes, optimizing your asset network, driving productivity across your labor pool. There's things you can do to be more insightful and making better decisions around driving the lifetime value of your customers. And we even think there's new revenue opportunities tied to AI and leveraging the power of your data. So in some ways, this year of AI just came at the right time. And maybe to put the finer point on this, Meta didn't call it the year of AI last year. We were all having so many conversations around AI and how this is changing the world. Meta called it the year of efficiency, which is why I'm not surprised in the poll question we had just a few minutes ago that everybody said that the impact was around task efficiency. If the rest of the world was talking about AI, Meta was talking about efficiency, and that's what we expect to see this year and over the next few, is how companies take now these really powerful tools and apply them to drive business impact. And we think, again, human capital, people are going to be at the very center of that. And that's what we want to talk about today. Next slide. Just to call out really quickly to further reinforce the point, look at the top, middle, and right. 50% or more of service tickets and call center interactions can be automated. And why is that so important? These are hard jobs to fill. People really don't want to work in call centers. And you have like over 50% turnover in call centers. This is a major challenge for companies to get good people in these roles. They're not fun jobs. It's rote, it's repetitive. You're talking to people who are, frustrated all the time. And yet you can create a better experience for a lower cost to serve, leveraging these kinds of tools. And again, goes straight to the heart of human capital. So I'm going to hand it over to Ken now to walk us through what do we mean when we say AI, because we throw this term around a lot. Let's get grounded in what artificial intelligence is and really bring it to life around how it's impacting people in their roles.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think that's so we do want to spend a few minutes talking about AI to demystify it, make sure we're talking about the same thing. Really, the spirit and the theme of this discussion is on the impact of AI on the entire workforce and how it's going to transform the knowledge worker, and it is beginning to transform the knowledge worker into the future. So this pause for a moment to make sure that we're grounded on this, hopefully will highlight the ways in which the workforce will change as a result of understanding what this thing is. So first of all, this term artificial intelligence became even more popular here in the last year with the rise on the far right of generative AI and these large language models that by now you certainly have heard of through ChatGPT and some of these other capabilities. But artificial intelligence has been around, even the term has been around since the 50s. It's really around using software and algorithms and data to try to mimic human decision making and human intelligence. It was pretty basic in the 50s and 60s with data processing and statistics and forecasting. Got more advanced in the 80s with machine learning capabilities. You started to see us do recommendation engines and these kinds of things that you might have seen in, on Netflix or on your websites recommending products. And then more recently, deep learning, which is these algorithms that really try to mimic the human brain in how we associate concepts together in this complex, deep, multi-layered network of constructs and information, which is getting us more rapid retrieval of information and a better way to store information. And then even further, recently, in the past probably 3 years, and then more popular here last year, are these generative AI models that are not only looking at numeric information, but looking at text and language and able to find meaning in language and pull out information and generate responses in a very meaningful way that's also back in language, so you can begin to communicate with your data like you've never been able to do before. And on the next slide, we talk about these large language models, which is this newest innovation in this realm of artificial intelligence. And what these models are doing is they're doing the very similar things that our math models have been doing for many years. They're going across a large data set, massive data set of these language models that are being produced by these third parties and giving us an ability through the more popular interface was ChatGPT, which was this app that allowed me to ask a question of this large language model and get a response back. Ask it to write a poem about a butterfly and a frog, and it'll come back and write this beautiful poem. That prompt and then that response is really the chat component of our interface to these very complex large language models. But what they're really doing is they're doing the same thing that analytics do, which predicts. And in this case, they're predicting the next likely word as it strings together sentences and then build something that looks extremely impressive and very meaningful. But I think the key here is that it's just building these sentences. There's no forethought. There's no sentient brain underneath these algorithms that are doing these likelihood models to say what's the next likely word and the next likely word. They're doing that all based on this underlying information, and that has very important implications for how we manage these systems and the roles that it's going to be required to manage these systems as we move forward, and we'll talk about those on the next slide. So this concept of artificial intelligence really brings in multiple steps. And the reason that we're showing you these multiple steps is really to demystify this thing is not some AI is not some app that you're going to download and is going to solve problems for your company or help your company make better decisions. It's actually, in order to do these things and make better decisions across your enterprise, you're going to have to bring together multiple disciplines that together make up something that seems artificially intelligent. And operates very much the same way our human brain does. And these multiple systems need to come together. And again, with the focus on workforce, hopefully, as we'll go through this slide and the next, you'll start to see where the workforce gets implicated across this process. But the first thing an artificially intelligent system does, as a human does, is we observe the world around us. So we collect information. And this has primarily been in the enterprise world, data sets. We all struggle to get information and find data sets that are going to be meaningful for us. But more and more data is being created around audio information or text information and call center information and social media information and image information. And all of this is data for a brand or for a company looking at documents and things of this nature. So we have to observe all this information. We have to have good systems that allow us to collect this data and make meaning of it initially. And artificial intelligence is actually doing a fantastic job of doing these scans and image analysis and textual scans and call listening. And it's really helping us observe the world around us in a better way. Once we collect all that information, we need to manage it. And this gets back to our traditional capabilities for managing large data sets, data warehousing, infrastructure, cloud-based data infrastructure, streaming information, a lot of capabilities that we have at our disposal now to manage and store information. And the magic is really in these AI algorithms is the ability to learn, right? We've had these machine learning algorithms and these predictive analysis and forecasting algorithms for many, many years. And now these language models or these learning models as well that are learning constructs. That's kind of the fun magic part to talk about, this algorithm that finds patterns and learns. But that's not very helpful in your organization unless you decide to do something with that information. So the next stage of you use an algorithm to find something interesting, well, now what do? Do I make a decision on this loan application? Do I make a decision on whether or not to pay this medical claim? Do I make a decision on where to send this driver? You have to make a decision and take some action as a result of that. And so there's a lot of business constraints and business rules and policies that have to be in place and human review that has to say, well, how am I going to use this information to make a decision? And then ideally you automate as much as you can, all the mundane decisions that you can automate and get efficiencies of scale. And that requires you to interface those algorithms into your business applications. So your website or your Salesforce interface or the driver tablet in their cab or wherever it happens to be. You have to take action, and that's application development and software integration. So once you have a system that's able to see something, remember it, learn, make a decision, and take action, that kind of embodies this concept of an artificially intelligent solution, and it requires these multiple systems to come together. So a couple of quick examples of these, and then we'll get into the workforce implementation, is this using artificial intelligence to really assist in the call center, either to automatically intercept calls and make determinations and improve this chatbot experience that we've all struggled with for the past 20 years. But now with generative AI, a much more powerful capability to create very natural language conversations with our customers. Delivering that type of solution requires the same processes we just talked about. You have to collect prior tickets, you have to collect customer information, you have to be able to remember that, you have to learn from that. What's this customer likely to be asking me? What's the best recommendation I should make to this customer at this part of their journey? I have to make those decisions. Are they eligible for the recommendation I'm about to make to them? So there's all kinds of business rules. And then of course I then do that final communication, which is to act upon that. We'll come back to this in a moment on the workforce, but on the next example, like this is an example of route automation. So create an AI that automatically routes my trucks to the proper destination in a most efficient way possible. Well, in order to have an AI do that, you need to have all the ticket information, you need your driver information, you need your road information, you need to be able to store all that data, you need to be able to learn to figure out what's the most optimal pathway and how do I pack these routes. Then you have to decide, okay, where am I going to send these tickets to what driver, and then send it up into their mobile device or their within the cab. And again, it's a capability that seems compact, but it requires these multiple steps to come together. So how does this impact the workforce? If we move forward, these processes that you're running your business on today, you're doing this today. You're trying to collect as much information as you can. You're trying to learn from that information, probably in a bunch of Excel files. You're getting in a room, you're trying to make a decision, and you're taking some decision action. That's how you're successful. That's how your company is growing, competing today in the industry. But that process that you're going through is highly manual. A lot of people physically manually entering data, a lot of people physically collecting that information and cleaning it up. Chasing it down, The learning is very manual, a lot of pivot tables and slicing and dicing and trying to figure stuff out on your own. A lot of business rules and other types of coding that you're trying to put in place to take action, then a lot of application development to try to mimic this kind of intelligent interface with your clients. But these applications take a lot of work to create, and go back to our chatbot example, oftentimes fail to delight our customers and our employees with their inability to be very prescriptive there. But where AI comes in is these automated techniques for every single one of these processes. So data ingestion, data storage, automated machine learning, business rules, and then integration through applications. You can automate many of these processes today and actually help your organization do the things that they're doing in the top row more efficiently, more intelligently, and bring out the mundane aspects of what that is and start to allow them to bring in their human element and their intelligence into the process and focus on more value-added services across this ecosystem. So these processes that are running your business today can be automated through data and analytics and decision automation, and with the advent of AI and certainly generative AI can help you automate a lot of your core business functions, which will have an impact on jobs all across that value chain. Some of the challenges that especially these new generative AI models are representing, that maybe and hopefully most of you have read these already, the risks associated with things like hallucinations. And hallucinations in this case is the language model producing a piece of output that seems reasonable. So for example, in this case, it's, what is the building code for easements in the city of Houston? If you were to ask this of a large language model, what it does is it's going to go to all the data that it has, and it's going to craft an elegant paragraph for you that's going to look extremely relevant and extremely accurate. But it's all the information in it is only based on the data that it had access to. So these could be old policies. These could be things that no longer apply. They could be wrong. The information that it learned from is just going to be reflected in its response. And then it's just going to make up a bunch of sentences because it'll try to finish these sentences to complete English and to complete the language, but it doesn't pause to say, is this even right? There's no algorithm in there that says, is this the right policy or is this the right easement? It's just going to build a sentence for you based on what it has. So what this means for us on the next slide is, if these algorithms are just kind of garbage in, garbage out, we've heard that term for many years, what do we need to do to make sure that we're not putting garbage in, that we're actually putting good data in, and that these models are being trained the way we want them to so that they can create the efficiency and the experience we want, but in an accurate way. And in order to do that, you need to stand up things like data governance around making sure that the data going in there is correct, understand how the model's been trained, even the prompt you send it, so how you ask this question through prompt engineering to make sure you're getting the right output out, and which is really training the model. So there are many steps that one needs to take at an enterprise scale in order to be able to make sure that these algorithms are producing the results that you want them to produce. So work needs to be done. And again, because the theme of this discussion is around impact on the workforce, people are going to have to do this. And we talk about potentially displacing paralegals, for example, because now generative AI can do that. Well, what I would be having the paralegals do is go look at the core documents to make sure that they're the right documents, make sure that the training coming out of it is accurate, do all that quality testing. So rather than them going and having to do the research themselves directly, what they can do now is be very instrumental in training this model and making sure this model is accurate. Beyond hallucinations, we also hear about bias, a very similar type of concept, but here is an example of bias that's fairly shocking. Rona Wang, this MIT student, put her photo in one of these generative AI sites and said, create a more professional looking image of me for my LinkedIn profile. And if you look at the image, you can see that the algorithm actually changed various characteristics about her ethnicity. It lightened her skin, changed the color of her eyes, changed the shape of her face slightly, and made her look more Caucasian in this example, which is pretty shocking and really disheartening that the algorithm would do this. Of course, the algorithm didn't decide that this person should look this way. It just looked at the data that it had and said, well, looking at this LinkedIn information, looking at females, this is what this is the information I have, so this is what I'm going to use for this image. So it's an example of not bias on the intent of the algorithm, but bias in the data. We didn't have a representative sample of information and rules that would help govern how this type of request would be responded to. And so the bias is just sitting there in the data. So again, the theme here is, well, what do we do about that? Well, it's quite simple. We've had for many years best practices in how to look for bias in our statistical data and our numeric data. And like we talk about on the next slide, with these generative AI models, yes, they're just going to spit out what they've been given, but it gives us the opportunity to put in place better practices, steps to review the data, to look at the bias and all this unstructured data. What data are we using to train these generative AI models, these language models, these image models, these speech models? And how do we make sure that we're applying our best discretion on the information that's going into these models? And those are jobs. Somebody has to do that. Somebody has to look at this information, make a decision, validate that, yes, we have an unbiased data set, and then make sure that the algorithm is doing what we want it to do that matches our values and ethics as a company. So this responsibility layer provides an opportunity for roles to be created to make sure we're using these systems in a very responsible way. And as a matter of fact, these hallucinations and bias is really what our governments, thank goodness, are trying to protect us citizens against. And the EU and the United States have put out rules and regulations around the use of AI and proper use of AI, which is really around transparency, measuring for bias, make sure that you are being responsible and you're measuring for bias, make sure that your algorithms are explainable, that you can actually understand how you're getting to the answer you're getting to. And these kind of regulations are going to be really good for us to make sure that we're getting good quality solutions. But in order to comply with the EU Act, if you're going to be doing business in the EU, or in order to comply with the US Act, if you're going to be doing any work for the federal government, and of course, as states start to adopt their own AI regulations, more and more corporate organizations are going to be accountable. It's going to require us to be purposeful and very responsible in processes that we put in place, which is going to take individuals to do that work. So on one side, you've got this massive capability to create much more efficiency in your organization, better quality, better experiences, but it's going to come at the cost of individuals coming to work and helping make sure that these systems are working effectively. So that new workforce may look something like this, where you had individuals that were potentially initially kind of doing data entry. Those individuals can be used to review the information and make sure that the data is relevant and recent. Folks that were actually doing those kind of roles can be doing document processing and labeling data that says, yes, this is a good policy, or no, this is not a good policy. Data stewardship and data quality and checking compliance. These are new roles that are going to get much more importance as you start to center your organization around these AI systems. Brand new jobs in the analytics space around prompt engineering and machine learning operations. These are going to be boosted up as well. And these business rules and AI ethics, which is what should this algorithm do? What decisions do we want it to make? Business rules are going to be in the heads of your business leaders and your experienced staff. So where somebody may have been back to our routing example before, maybe they were a route manager and part of their job is being displaced by automation, but they're an expert in routing. So they should be applied and retrained, take a new role. And how do we manage the rules and make sure that this algorithm is actually producing the kinds of routes that we want? So great opportunity to kind of transform the workforce. This is really a situation where, up until today, we've had computers assisting humans to do their job. And really, when you start to center your organization around AI, you're going to have humans helping the computer do its job. So it's going to be a transformation in how we see the work and the interface that we have between our AI systems and our work.
So speaking of the humans, what we're really talking about, Ken mentioned earlier, is a mass reinvention of the knowledge worker that's going to touch, at least in some part, virtually every role that we have in an organization. And as you can imagine, it's already pervasive that so many people are using ChatGPT, whether their companies have gone for that corporate-wide or not. There are many that are already starting to use Microsoft Copilot, which has already been out at scale. And so these are the kinds of things that we're going to see more and more, these assistants that are sitting there kind of on the side, embedded now in our work tasks, helping us. And more, the processes that Ken talked about earlier, whether it be, contact center or routing automation, these very process-specific use cases will start to permeate. If we think about, and again, putting our hat on, mass reinvention of the knowledge worker, how should we be thinking about this? Where is the biggest area of impact? Simply because of the kinds of processes that are involved in the large volumes of people engaged in these types of capabilities, you can imagine things like call center sales, sales support, all of the marketing and content and creative work. From an operations perspective, we talked about those route managers, a moment ago, so operational leaders. From technology, believe it or not, it may be in a stroke of irony, these software engineering co-pilots can drive a tremendous amount of efficiency in the development of new applications. Somewhere, depending upon who you're talking to and how advanced they are, anywhere from 20 to 40% efficiency in the development of software, and from technology support and operations. So these are simply because of the processes involved and the volume of people that are engaged, areas where you can see us looking at first. But clearly, any and all of these roles. I mean, you gave the paralegal example a moment ago, Ken. So obviously, the legal department would be engaged. Coincidentally, by the way, paralegals, one of the areas where we have shortages. We have a projected shortage of the number of paralegals. So thank goodness that we're going to have some of these tools that can help drive efficiency. Moving on. So what do the humans think about this? So we're just now starting to get some early returns on how people feel about this when this is incorporated in their job, when they are on the, we'll say, leading edge of this. And so one financial services company, as a matter of fact, has rolled out Microsoft Copilot to a wide swath, thousands of employees, but they started with a few hundred of folks that were really excited about being a part of this. And in that group of a few hundred, after they'd had, good 6 weeks or so with the Microsoft Copilot tool set, they reached out and asked them how they felt about it. And there were two things that, over everything else, that were of concern to, by the way, the people that raised their hand and wanted to be a part of this. They said, I want to go first. So within that community, the two things that were of primary concern is the first was, listen, all this efficiency and productivity that seems to be happening now is great, but does that not bring with it job security risk? So there is some concern around, what does all of this productivity mean? Am I at risk now because I'm using these tools? I think here it's really important for us to highlight the difference between automation and augmentation. These are really important words, matter of fact, to pause on for a moment. If we are automating the task, then that means the task is now being done by the computer, and there are new roles, potentially, as Ken, very likely that Ken's talking about, that is going to test to make sure that what came out of that automation was accurate and the like. Augmentation is a different thing together. I don't think you can look at any augmentation use case I've seen and extrapolate that into mass reductions in people and roles. You're giving them tool sets that maybe helps get that first draft of that presentation out there, but this is less of a job risk, and anybody that we've talked to, I think, are viewing that the same. So anyway, the first thing is job risk. Second thing is privacy. The way these tools work is by ingesting all of the information that's out there. They're ingesting all of your emails. They're listening to your conference calls. They're looking across your corpus of all the documents that you're working on. And so the second area of concern is around privacy that came up. So anyway, these are the things that people are concerned about. Now, what are the positives? In another example, BCG, the top strategy consulting company, was working with, I think it was MIT, if I'm not mistaken. I get it mixed up. But anyway, they're working with one of the large research colleges on this. And they put about 700 of their folks leveraging these tools. And what they found is that they got 25% more work done, and it was a 40% higher quality. That it had less of an impact on the absolute top performers, but the average performer got brought up to a top performer. And the people who enjoyed the tools loved having them. That there was a significant amount of positivity around less mundane tasks, not starting with that first draft, having a better of experience in the tasks that they were working through. So you can see that there are some concerns that folks have around what does this mean for us, but there's also a lot to be gained when we look at the positives associated with these tools. So there's two levels I think that we're talking about in this conversation. The first is this role that HR has across the enterprise to support the enterprise. The other is what, in fact, inside of the HR organization itself, could this be meaningful? And it turns out the answer to that is quite a lot. So if you can imagine, some of the most challenging things that happen inside of an HR department is around performance management, gathering all the information around performance. There are a lot of things that could be done with AI and generative AI to help support that process. By the way, from a recruiting perspective, writing the job descriptions and job specs and getting these things posted out there to drive the recruiting process, the initial evaluation of all the candidates that come through, things that can be leveraged for generative AI. Onboarding people. Just think of the power of having a generative AI-driven chatbot that has all of the material around the HR policies and practices. And now you can get that into the hands of your employees. They can go on and ask any question anytime and have this intuitive interaction. Think of the time that that's going to save your HR departments. A tremendous amount that can be done from a learning and development standpoint. One of the things we expect is more just-in-time, highly personalized training that will be possible as a result of these tools. Again, think about all of the manuals that exist, particularly if you're in an operations environment, industrial environment. All of the manuals and learning have to be there's people who have been on the job for 30 years that it took to build up this corpus knowledge. But now imagine you have all of this in the fingertips of somebody new who can in natural language interact and ask questions. So there's a whole number of areas where the HR department can avail themselves of these kind of capabilities, which I think is going to be really important considering how busy they're going to be supporting the broader enterprise with this transition that's going to take place over the next decade. So I guess as we just bring this to a close, and before we hand it back over to Tim, our thought today is that this is the most important time, if ever, to be in the business of helping human capital through this transition. We are seeing the mass reinvention of the knowledge worker that will occur through the end of this decade. And it is going to be an incredibly impactful transition for the people and their experience as you go through it. And by the way, to thrive in this new era of human and technology augmented working together, what an important opportunity that is for all of us. So with Tim, I will hand it back over to you.
Yep, if I can learn how to unmute myself. Here we go. Yeah, thanks, Rob and Ken. And guys, I know there's a lot in there. And for those who are, again, either listening live or as we post these out and listen to these on demand, and there's a lot of things in there that you kind of have to unpack and really kind of process. So I think the important thing in here is not something that we have to address all at once. It's something but it is something that needs to be addressed, and you need to continue to think about it, which is the whole reason why we did this series, is kind of start giving you those areas and footings to kind of help you understand how do you need to start approaching this, where do you need to start thinking about things. And then, of course, Ken and Rob in our group are working with a lot of different companies as well to kind of help them through that process. Feel free to reach out to us, but we want to make sure that you're aware, want to make sure that you understand. As both Ken and Rob mentioned, these tools, everything that's out there can be incredibly powerful. They can also be incredibly dangerous. So being able to use them in the right way is very crucial. And so with that being said, Zach, I think we have one more poll that we wanted to bring up here towards the end. Let's have our poll, and then we'll get into the panel discussion. All right. So in the next 2 to 3 years, how do you expect AI to impact your jobs or impact jobs in your organization? No impact, test efficiencies, new job creation, job redefinition, job elimination. You can kind of see the same answers here, but a little bit different time frame. Where do you kind of see this in the next 2 or 3 years kind of landing? And again, we'll give everybody a few seconds, and then we'll post the results. All right, Zach, I think we're ready. Yeah. And you can kind of see a change there from, task efficiency to new job creation and job redefinition. Again, I think some of that's hopefully from some of the things that, that Rob and Ken talked about. But, I think you'll still see, as we start seeing a bigger sample here, task efficiency continuing to grow and those type of things. But definitely being able to see new jobs and how they're defined is a huge part of that. All right, very cool. So with that being said, let's jump into our panel discussion. I did not have my screen on share, so I don't know if there's any questions. I don't think there are from the audience yet. Again, please, as we're going through these, let us know if you guys have any questions. We're more than glad to answer these live while we're on here. So we'll start off with some of the ones that we kind of put together. So Rob, we'll start with you. So with all the things that we talked about, and kind of unpacked for these guys, all the different processes that we're looking at, there's ways to pack customer service. We talked a lot about the the legal aspects of things that people who can be involved in that. What are your thoughts though, as if I'm leading a business and looking at this and all the things that you guys are talking about from a scale perspective on tomorrow when I look at this, what do you think? Is this going to be a mass disruption of employment today, or is this something that's going to slowly evolve over time that kind of have time to prepare for and start doing almost like a roadmap type of exercise? What are your thoughts on how this scales over time?
And one of the concerns people have talked about is what's the impact on society if all of our jobs are automated. So yeah. Maybe just to put this in perspective, because you asked the timing question, which I think is probably the most important one. I think it's clear that it's going to be significantly changed, though. How long do we have to adapt to that? Because we've had new technology throughout history that's come and made major significant differences in the way we all conduct work, and this is no different. The study that, by the way, all of these colleges are out there researching with different companies. Harvard with BCG, but this one that I'm talking about next, Berkeley and Oxford. So they got out to 2,800 of the top AI researchers, and they go out and ask them any number of questions. They've done this a couple of years in a row. In the last survey, they asked them, how long will it take for AI to get to a point to where it is better at all of the tasks that a human could do? And by the way, I'm going to stay away from this, artificial general intelligence, what all that means. Let's just stick with the question that was asked to the top AI researchers around the world. How long will it take for AI to get as good or better at all of the tasks that humans perform? And they suggested that will probably take until the mid-2040s. So here we are finding that we got a good couple decades before we got to worry about artificial intelligence being at this super level that we seem to be talking about in the news a lot today, which is so far off. It's kind of more science fiction. But we also know that Gartner said that we expect generative AI, this capability that Ken was talking about earlier, generative AI, to go through the hype cycle that they normally see, where it's all this buzz that we had last year, and then for a few years people are stubbing their toe on the technology, and then they start to figure out, and then it gets to mass productivity, and it's incorporated and working effectively. Gartner expects that generative AI is going to take 2 to 5 years on that cycle. And so we can see that I don't think we have to worry about the complete irrelevance of humans anytime soon, if ever. But we will see some significant productivity capability happening over the next few years from something like generative AI. And in the various studies that are out there, and by the way, it's kind of all over the map, people expect that about 80% of tasks can have at least 20% impact across these kinds of tools. So it is large in scale, but incremental, by role. And this is where I think we get back to this conversation of automation versus augmentation. It's really the augmentation story that we're going to be living with for the next few years. So hopefully that gives people some confidence and encouragement. Yeah,
and a little bit of breath of fresh air, just to understand that this is not something that if I don't do tomorrow, that it's going to affect. And I think a lot of people are still again, especially since generative AI, which is a big part of this that's pushed this forward. AI has been around for years, as we all know. But generative AI has done a big job of pushing this forward. There's still a lot of things out there that people are trying to figure out how to use it. So it takes time over time. So, given that, it sounds like, for most companies, they're going to have some time to figure out where this fits in their organization, some time to figure out how it's going to work. How do you guys have the people you guys have been working with, the people you've been talking to, how are you kind of taking, how are you kind of working with them in these tasks to be able to understand how do they navigate this? How do they create their plans for how they're going to do it? When they wake up tomorrow, what are the things that they should start thinking about? And again, I said a roadmap, but almost kind of a roadmap of where they need to go to be able to get to where they need to be over time with this.
Yeah, it's just it's such a wide spectrum right now, Tim, as you might expect. There's a number of management teams where people are still focused on just, can we get a common view of what AI is and just level set that. And then on some of the more mature organizations, the question is, all right, we've got a sense of what our AI vision and strategy is. We've done an assessment. We have a sense of what it means for our industry and our business. We've got a sense of the functions that we're going to, initiate experiments with. And in those enterprises, they're already now starting down the path of what does this mean for workforce planning? What does this mean around the populations of our people that we're targeting for reskilling? So, imagine if 80% of your roles are going to have 20% or so of it, that is impacted. You've got all this augmentation capability. You're going to be making these investments. You want to leverage this capability. You're going to want to do some retraining and reskilling across your organization. World Economic Forum is identified 60% of the people in the workforce that are going to need to be retrained over the next 5 years, yet less than half of that amount, so 30%, have the access and capability to do it. So you really see companies starting to internalize, all right, these are the opportunities that this presents for our enterprise. This is how it's going to impact roles. This is what we're going to do to support our people and put them into a position to be successful. And by the way, start targeting and reskilling into some of these new roles that Ken talked about, these new capabilities that people will need, and being out in front. Such a wide spectrum right now. I think the best thing that you could do if you've yet to as a management team, or if you were an HR professional out there listening to this right now, and you're saying, listen, I really don't know what our company's stance is on AI or where we're planning on making some bets, then that would be a good call to action to get together with your management team, start asking those questions to make sure that you're in a position to prepare the organization for this transition that's coming.
Yeah, and we have a question here I'll get to in just a second, because I think it's right in line with this. And kind of just to kind of break down what you said in the way that I would think about it is, number one, if I'm an executive, even though a lot of this is very technical and I may not be a very technical person, I still need to understand what's out there. I need to understand all the things that, not all the things, but the things that I need to be aware of that AI can do, good and bad. So I need to understand how it's going to affect my organization, good and bad. What are the things I need to be prepared to protect myself against? What are the things that we can be using within the organization, within all the different levels of the organizations to be able to promote it? What skills are going to be needed within those groups to be able to support it? And how do I start putting a plan together? So that's kind of how I would think about it in a step-by-step, for me, on my side of things. The question that we had that came up was, I'll be in a room of CHROs next week. What can I suggest to do in 2024 to make important incremental steps towards adopting and successfully using AI in HR? And I think that's kind of where you were going.
In HR.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, Ken, you and I were with a group of HR professionals a few weeks ago, and they had this exact same question. What are some things we could do this year? And very specifically, the question was, what could we do right now? Like, what's the absolute very first thing that we could do? So to answer both those questions, what you could do if you're an HR professional or a leader in an HR organization, wanting to get your team versed and comfortable in these tools. One of the banes of the existence of HR professionals are writing job descriptions. Mm-hmm. And if your people have yet to do it, what a great opportunity it would be to go out to ChatGPT or any other LM for that matter, without putting any company proprietary information in there, by the way, and experiment with that tool to create job descriptions. just as a way to get your team comfortable with the tool and what it's like. If you've yet to experiment with it, that would be a great way to imagine it. The second thing would be making sure that you have aligned, make sure your HR leadership team has aligned with broader management strategic priorities that are tied to AI. So you understand where you're trying to steer the human capital in the organization. If that has yet to be defined clearly, then the questions that you would want to get on the docket are, how do we see our company taking advantage of AI to drive, efficiency, and which functions do we see are going to be leading the path, and how do we as HR start getting in some conversations with those functions to think about the impact that that's going to have on the workforce around new job descriptions, around your training or reskilling, new roles that need to be acquired. How do you get really clear around the strategy so that you can now start to put a plan in place? I would put it at both levels. Ken, what would you add to that?
I think those are right. And I would also say, especially if I was talking to some HR professionals next week, I would say, let's not boil the ocean. Let's be very specific. What business problem or business strategy are you trying to help the organization be ready for in 2024 and 2025?
That's right.
And then let's make sure we have the right organization to do that. Because you can easily boil the ocean with everything that we've talked about here in the last hour. I think having an understanding of the ways that AI could impact your workforce and kind of being conversant at that so that you're able to be sensitive to that as it comes up in conversation is important. But I would say be very, very focused. If, for example, call center reinvention is the strategy for next year, then focus on that area and figure out what roles need to be in place to be able to support that, assuming you're going to deploy AI to help you do that. And just be very narrowly focused, and then demonstrate that win, learn from that win, and then go to the next business process. So I would think, yes, you could, general knowledge and awareness is very, very good, but be careful not to spend too much time pontificating about some eventual future. Just be very practical in your approach to helping your business be successful.
Yeah. And I think as you identify, this is like, any other project, I don't want to simplify it too much, but any other projects that you have, especially in the IT area, where you're looking at all the opportunities you have, it's really easy to get overwhelmed or try to think, oh, I have to do all this stuff. You look for the opportunities that are going to create the most value for your organization in the time that you can do it, and you start prioritizing things and creating. And I always say roadmap again. I go back to that. What is my roadmap going to look like of the things that I want to start with today that can make the most impact today, and then continue to build on that as you go. You don't have to do it all at once, and should not do it all at once, because you'll probably end up, number one, overwhelming yourself, getting too many things out there, and probably accomplishing a lot of nothing. These are, again, tools, but they're not solutions to be able to do everything. You have to be able to use them in the right way. Ken?
Yeah, if I could add one thing, if you have this opportunity to be speaking to this broad audience of HR professionals, maybe the one thing to take away would be ensure that as an HR professional, you have a seat at the table. I think, Rob, you were kind of alluding to it. Ensure that you have a seat at the table for this transformation. Ensure that if there is an AI board or an AI committee being stood up, or if there are decisions that need to be made along the way, that as an HR professional, you are there representing the employee, the impact of the workforce, and that you have an equal voice in the transformation of AI within your organization. So ensure that, and then from there, once you get that position, then you can start to help govern the organization as you move forward.
Yep. So with that being said, and I think this kind of leads into the next one, as we talk about it, and I've heard it said over and over again, is AI going to replace my job? Only if you're not learning AI. It's kind of usually the response to that. If you're not using AI in your own job, then it may be replaced. But as you start looking at people, if you're an HR person, you're hiring people, or if you're looking at people within your organization, how do you kind of think about getting people trained, the skills that they need, finding the right skills within people to be able to be successful in what is going to be a new world in the next year of people who have to know how to use the AI or be irrelevant?
Yeah, again, I think Rob and I were in a conversation with a client on this specific topic recently as well. And I go back to the use case, because if in fact the organization is saying, actually, no, we're actually in a position where we're going to outsource our call center. We're just going to outsource that. We're going to focus on our core value proposition in other areas. Then in that case, why invest at all? And just make sure you hire a vendor that's doing a great job, an efficient job of handling your customer calls. So therefore, you wouldn't go invest in roles that are specific to that kind of environment. So the question is, strategically, where are you going as an organization? What is your priority area? What area do you want to go fix? What's required of that area? And assuming new roles are required, then let's go talk about those new roles. So I think it's really purposefully driven conversations around specific use cases. And then you can say, well, for that role, for example, if we go back to this route manager example, if we're going to automate route managers, we're going to need route managers to do this new function. So let's work on that job and redefine that job and expand their training and expand the expectation of that function. So I would be very purposeful about it.
And just kind of in that same vein again, when you think about we talked about skills that people need to have, some of the hot skills out there, and we could probably pick on a lot of different groups of them. Marketing. A lot of people are using AI, generative AI, to generate copy for them, the things, the messaging that they're sending out. But to pick on, I think one that gets a lot of attention is developers, people who are developing software. Because now there's a co-pilots that do a lot of that stuff for you. Low code applications. Would you discourage someone that from in that field, or is looking at going that field from doing that because it's going to be replaced? Or what are your thoughts on people who are wanting to do that? Is there still a place for them in the job market?
Interesting. Yeah, well, I think the job's going to become more efficient. Code cleanup, identification, starting with blocks of code that it can find, looking at code quality, code efficiency. This job is going to be supercharged. I think it's going to be a much more efficient job. So where you might have needed 100 resources to do a project before, you might be able to get away with 75 or 60 because that team can be much more efficient. And if you look at those numbers, you might say, well, then does that mean we need less developers? And is that going to, for example, if I was a third-party development organization with 10,000 developers, I might think, well, this is going to impact my organization by X amount because we're going to be able to deliver much more efficiency. So in that case, it could sound like a red flag. However, if you think about everything we just talked about, there's a heck of a lot of development work that's going to happen for companies to transform their workforce and use AI at the center of their decision processes. So it's going to be offset by the amount of work that needs to be done to be able to build these systems, to build the AI systems, to build the data. So I would say, if I was coaching my child and their future education, yes, absolutely computer science. Of course, I would be biased towards data science, but I wouldn't discourage anybody from being in computer science.
Not to mention, by the way, that computer science and data science courses are exceptional at teaching logical thinking and problem solving, which is the core skill that you're going to need regardless of what's happening with AI. Matter of fact, that is it's these rote repetitive things that are becoming less valuable, but it's that critical problem solving, that structured thinking that is going to be of greater and greater importance, and you'll learn the heck out of those in those programs.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to see some limitations in some of the language models, the LLMs that are out there right now. And I think what, from what I hear in the industry, at least, is a lot of people are going to be developing their own LLMs individually towards industry or their niche or even their own company that they use internally or sell outside of that. So I think the people who are developing those things are going to have to be highly skilled and truly be able to understand this. We got about a minute left. So any last thoughts, Rob and Ken, just on this area as far as, advice that you guys want to give in the last minute, and we'll respect everybody's time and let everybody kind of go on.
I love Ken's point around being practical. And I would just add to that any organization that invests some time in experimentation over the next couple of years in these domains is going to be in a much better position, as that learning starts to seep its way through the organization. So just encouraging folks to bring some practical experiments to bear.
Yeah. Completely. And if I was a CEO, I'd be very excited about the opportunities that AI is presenting. But the first question I would ask is, are we protected? Do we have data loss issues? How are my employees using ChatGPT today? What are our policies? So maybe if you're not sure that you're protected, maybe the first thing to do is quickly review your policies, review your user access, review the training, make sure you protect your company, and then move on to innovation and growth.
And completely. Very cool. And we have one other question. Let me kind of wrap this up real quick, and then we can answer that question pretty quick, which then goes back to that. Again, thanks to Ken and Rob again for a great series. if you have not seen all of these on this, there's some time involved in going through and watching this. But again, if you're a leader in any organization that is looking for how do we manage these things within our organization, there's tons of information out there. Bring a notebook, write some stuff down. A lot of stuff to learn in here. You can get those. We have all these published out on our YouTube, and this one will be published out as well. So go out to Tag CXO. You can just do a Google search for Tag CXO YouTube channel. If you have a hard time finding it, and it'll pop up. And so it'll have those out there and some clips that you can get from it. We're posting some of this stuff on LinkedIn as well. Again, Tag CXO is in the business of IT leadership and helping those who are needing the level of IT leadership that's out there that has to have to run their organization. So lots of information out there, and everything is for leaders in this area that we can kind of help them along in their journey. And so I would suggest that everybody who can jump out there. We won't get into this. I did put in this slide. I found a LinkedIn slide just to kind of talk about the importance of this. And if you look at number 2, I'm sorry, this was actually a LinkedIn post that someone I know, a CEO for another company, but and he was talking about some of his failures he had in a new business. One of them was not investing in a technical leader. Hiring a CTO was a huge mistake, or not hiring a CTO. Lost customers, wasteful spending, and market rate. And the importance of what Paul and Zach and those guys and all the guys that we work with at Tag CXO of what they're doing is truly immeasurable. And unfortunately, some people don't find that out till later down the line. But I would suggest that you reach out if you can. So let me go back over. I'm gonna stop sharing again. I know we're a couple minutes over time. Recommend any resource to improve ChatGPT?
Oh, yeah, I see that question. It's a good question. Most of the kind of training for prompt engineers, at least the ones that I've reviewed, they've been pretty shallow, pretty good. Talks to you about some of the best practices in prompt engineering. But frankly, there's no better training than a specific data set and prompt engineering to that data set. I don't think it's a generic enough or proven enough capability that you can send somebody to train and then it can apply to your business on day one. So I think a general understanding of ChatGPT, prompt engineering in any of these contexts, there's tons of them out there, is good enough. And the real learning and the real benefits just going to be from just grinding it out on your own data.